Well, we're pretty focused on what's going on within our own borders, but it turns out it's not unique. The elites around the world are going crazy. For example, in France, National Front leader Marine Le Pen has been charged with a crime, a serious crime. What did she do? Well, in 2015, she sent tweets that showed executions committed not by her, but by ISIS. And that's a crime somehow, okay? In South Africa, the parliament has begun amending the constitution to allow land owned by white South Africans to be confiscated by the government without compensation. The motion was brought by Julius Malema, a longtime gadfly and violent nutcase, who clarified that he does not support killing the entire white population right now. So why does this matter? Well, I don't know. It's wrong. But also, we give South Africa huge amounts of taxpayer money every year. Last year, we gave them more than $350 million in aid, obviously administered by the government, the ANC. Mark Stein is an author, columnist, and world traveler, and he joins us now. So let's go very quickly in order now. Marine Le Pen. Right. I don't know that much about Marine Le Pen, but I think you're allowed to send out tweets of ISIS atrocities without being arrested, right? How is this happening?
Well, and she was also one of the two final candidates in the French presidential election, and it never looks good when, in fact, you are trying to criminalize political opposition, which is what the French state has tried to do with Marine Le Pen, and is what the Dutch state has tried to do with Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, for example. In this case, lefty French politicians were basically saying there's no difference between Marine Le Pen's party and ISIS. And what Madame Le Pen did was point out that this is what ISIS does. ISIS chops off the heads of people it captures, including, in this case, James Foley from my state, from New Hampshire. And that's actually quite important because there is a decadence in our political discourse where Democrats, for example, frequently say, oh, these social conservatives are as bad as the Taliban. Well, no, we're not. Yeah, you know, there's one side that is burning homosexuals, throwing them off rooftops, decapitating people, killing them for listening to music. And on the other side, there are people you happen to disagree with in a Western multi-party system. And you devalue political discourse every time you compare Marine Le Pen to ISIS. So good for her for pointing out the difference.
Good for her. So to South Africa, which is such a depressing story that it's almost hard to bring up. But here the bottom line is, for decades, the left in the United States was against apartheid, and good for them. I mean, it's worth being against that. But they also were champions of the ANC, the African National Congress, which has been in power ever since '94, and they basically destroyed the country, and now they're attempting to turn it into Zimbabwe by crushing the minority in that country. So, okay, they're doing that. Why are we subsidizing it with U.S. taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, you've got a point there, Tucker. Just on that, the left was right to be against apartheid. They were in South Africa. Just for the record, I regard what Chuck Schumer is doing, rejecting Trump judicial nominees on the basis of race, as progressive neo-apartheid. And I don't like old-school apartheid or the new school Democrat Party apartheid. What's happening in South Africa? In 1980, Robert Mugabe was told, you don't have to make the same mistakes as the first generation of independent African nations like Tanzania and Ghana 15 years earlier. He went ahead and made them supersized, especially with regard to white farmers. 15 years later, the ANC was told, you don't have to make the same mistakes that Robert Mugabe made in Zimbabwe. Now they're actually doing it all over again, with the difference being this. South Africa is the economic anchor of that continent, and it has existed with one foot in the developed and one foot in the developing camp since the corrupt ANC took over a couple of decades ago. If they actually turn South Africa into an economic basket case like Zimbabwe, that has huge consequences, including the fact that millions and millions of people will be sent scurrying over the Mediterranean into Europe.
No, it's totally true.
The State Department, and the State Department should not be subsidizing that.
I agree. And liberals pretend it's not happening, which is actually patronizing. Why are liberals giving cover to one of the most corrupt regimes in the world? I've never understood that. I don't understand them. Mark Stein.
It's virtue signaling.
Well, that's exactly. You're right. I guess I do understand. Such a good point.
That's it. Yeah, the fact that they're miserable makes no difference. Miserable lives, lives ruined, people murdered.
Exactly. The great Mark Stein. Thank you, Mark. 6 years ago, U.S. intervention under the Clinton administration, Obama administration rather, helped topple Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi from power. As Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton helped push for that intervention. And then this happened.
That is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
Here she is bragging about toppling the government of Libya. Pretty fun diversion for the Secretary of State. She's bragged about it for years after, but actual Libyans didn't find it as amusing. They've been suffering ever since. In the vacuum created by Gaddafi's fall, an ancient institution, in fact, has been revived: slavery. Glenn Reynolds is a law professor at the University of Tennessee. He recently wrote about this, and he joins us tonight. Glenn, thank you for coming on. This is one of those stories where we just couldn't let it go. You know, you see these politicians make decisions, particularly foreign policy decisions. They declare victory, and no one checks to see what the aftermath is like. You did. Tell us what the effect of this decision was on the people of that country.
Well, it's been a debacle, of course. It goes back to 2003 when we made an agreement with Muammar Gaddafi, the strongman who ran Libya, that if he would give up his weapons of mass destruction, we wouldn't try to overturn him. And we didn't keep that promise. In 2011, Hillary Clinton, together with Susan Rice and Samantha Power and the Obama administration, decided to kick him out of power. They bombed and got rid of him, and as you can see, sort of gloated after he was killed by a mob. And there wasn't much of a plan on what to do next, other than some advice Hillary's advisor Sidney Blumenthal gave her about how to fit this into her presidential campaign plans. And now Libya's torn up with civil war. You've got fighting militias. You had a wave of refugees passing through Libya. A lot of them got stuck in Libya, and now some of them are being sold essentially as slaves in slave markets to work on farms and that sort of thing there. And CNN covered that, BBC covered that, and it became a story last week. And I saw it, and I thought, you know, this is a real mess. I mean, we heard about this, we knew it was bad, but years later, Hillary's sort of gotten off scot-free on this. People don't bring it up, and yet this is a royal debacle.
Of course it is. And Susan Rice and Samantha Power never hold to account for this. But I wonder what effect it has on the countries in the region around the world. I mean, next time we go to a leader, a strongman somewhere, and say, look, you know, disarm and we'll reward you, why would anybody ever follow those instructions again?
Oh, we're ruined for a generation with this. I mean, right now, you know, we'd like Kim Jong-un to give up his nukes,
right,
and he probably wouldn't anyway, but we certainly can't make him any promises he'd believe, because who would?
That's an excellent point. Has there been any soul-searching on the part of the people who did this? They wrecked an entire country and threw the whole region into chaos. Has anyone apologized or said, you know, maybe we've learned something from this?
You know, not really. During the 2016 campaign, in one of the early primary debates when Senator James Webb was still running, he raised the issue with Hillary, and she just sort of blew it off and said, oh, no, it was a big success. I've certainly never heard Samantha Power, who was pushing this as part of an effort to establish a doctrine of international law called responsibility to protect as a justification for intervention. Never heard her say, oh, gee, we kind of blew that. Although you notice that responsibility to protect didn't get brought up again after this.
Of course not. Now that they're selling slaves in the market. One of the least impressive people ever to serve at a high level of government. Professor, thank you for bringing this to the attention of our viewers. Worth it.
Thank you.
Well, Hillary Clinton, as you know, if you have a television set, has routinely represented herself as America's great crusader against sexual harassment and abuse.
The whole world heard him talking about the terrible way he treats women.
It is not enough to condemn campus sexual assault. We need to end campus sexual assault.
We don't want a president who demeans women.
I take on the issues of sexism and misogyny and talk about it, because we need to pull it out and put it in the bright light.
It's odd, then, that Clinton was so very slow, so slow that someone for her aides commented on it in public, in responding to the reactions against Weinstein. After 5 days, Clinton finally released a statement saying she was, quote, shocked and appalled by the allegations. CNN's Aaron Burnett pointed out that, quote, HRC spoke for 90 minutes last night, didn't mention Harvey Weinstein. She didn't give women a pass for not voting for her, but she gave him one. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised, though. In two of the biggest sexual harassment scandals of the past 3 decades, Bill Clinton and Anthony Weiner, Hillary Clinton was right in the middle. What's a third scandal where she failed to step up? In fact, she may be the enabler, it turns out.